July 17th, 1904, Columbus, Ohio. A saloon keeper from Youngstown is strapped into the electric chair. It took 1 year, 2 trials, and even a decision from the Ohio State Supreme Court to get him there. But this wasn't just a saloon owner with a flair for drink and drama. He was also a man who brutally stabbed his estranged wife right in her own backyard. It was a crime that didn't just end a life, it upended 3 more, leaving their surviving children orphaned. But their father was worried about himself. And at precisely 12:01 a.m., he was scheduled to die. And he did. Eventually. This is the unbelievable electric story of Michael G. Schiller. 3rd time's a harm. Hey y'all, I'm Kris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potterworth. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends in what I'm usually Hungary.
Are you kidding me? You picked Hungary?
Yeah. Why?
Because these people are Hungarian.
I swear to everybody listening.
We do not talk about this.
No.
That was genuine shock.
We're symbiotic. Okay, for our friends in Hungary, üdvözöljük. There you go.
Michael Schiller probably couldn't have said it better himself.
Jeez, I can't
Although
believe
I
it.
think they actually spoke German.
No.
But
I was going through my whole list of, welcomes today, and all of a sudden Hungary just stuck out to me, and I was actually hungry, so, why not?
only you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who are just like you and love true crime can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below.
Yes.
If you want true crime with us all the time, please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. All you have to do is go to your Facebook account, type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions, you're in. Please go join.
Mm-hmm.
I love to post extra photos and stuff. We always have deep discussions in there.
Oh, yeah.
Some good discussions in there.
And some really stupid memes.
And
It's
some
great.
really stupid memes.
They're awesome.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we also have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee.
Please do.
Or me one Diet Mountain Dew, which is what I am allowed to have now.
Yep.
You can find that link in our show notes. While you're digging through our show notes, you can also send us a text. And the link to that is at the very top of the show notes where it says, send Kris and Rob a text.
Please do.
Now, honey, you know I love a good true crime story that maybe isn't as well known. And that's what we have today.
All right.
And of course, you know I love a historical case. And I love digging through all the old newspapers.
Yes, you do.
I was reading through the Cincinnati Enquirer from 1903 and 1904.
Oh, wow.
The Reds were not having a good season.
That seems to
So
be...
not a lot has changed.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. VindyArchives.com, The Evening Review, the Akron Beacon Journal, the Cleveland Leader, the Cincinnati Post, the Cleveland Press, the Marion Star, the Dayton Herald, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Cincinnati Enquirer, Crestline Advocate, Find a Grave, and finally, Historical Crime Detective, who actually posted, quote, notice to all creators, and then in parentheses, podcasters, do not use this material without accurate accreditation to Historical Crime Detective. I'm tired of you acting did all your homework, he left like out. I'm tired of you acting like you did all your homework when all you did was just grab it from this blog,
Oh,
end quote.
okay. Sorry, dude.
Which I thought was pretty darn funny. I
Yeah.
always do my homework, but I thank you kindly, HCD, for your blog.
Yes.
His name is Jason Lucky Morrow. He's the guy who owns the blog. He's an author with 4 books, which you can find on Amazon. And I will also provide a link to this fellow author's works as well. I'm all about supporting other writers.
Is that enough, Jason?
And you can find those links and his blog and all the other sources in the show notes.
There you go. All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Now, we don't know too much about our subject's early life. What we do know is that in 1903, Michael G. Schiller lives, works, and owns a saloon in Youngstown, Ohio. And he's, quote, prominent in ward politics, end quote.
Okay.
And in Youngstown, Ohio, ward politics refer to the representation and influence of individual wards within the city council. So each ward elects a city council member.
Got it.
And even though he didn't come from money, he's made a great deal of money in America with his saloon. And I did also read that he was a little bit of a, I don't want to say he's miserly, but he believed in saving.
Gotcha.
Michael is Austro-Hungarian. There it is.
Okay.
And for a little backstory, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is also known as the Dual Monarchy, was a multinational state in Central Europe that was formed in 1867 through the union of the Austrian Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. And it existed until 1918. And he and his wife, he has a wife, her name is Mary. She is just listed as being Hungarian, which kind of makes sense to me, but I think she too was Austro-Hungarian.
Got it.
But so little is mentioned about her to the point where it's really hard to even find her name. She's always referred to as Mrs. Schiller because women just didn't get a name back then. You were just known by your husband's name, which is total bollocks. To quote our friends over across the pond.
Yes.
Now, Mary and Michael, who are both 38, have 4 children, a 12-year-old daughter named Mary, who they call Minnie, and 3 sons. Gustav, I read he was sometimes called Gussie. He's 8. Fred, who is 4, and Michael Leo, who is just over a year old. Now, at some point in either 1902 or 1903, Mary divorces Michael and gets custody of their 4 children. And according to some sources, she took him for everything he had, quote, with a decree for alimony that stripped him of everything he possessed except the clothing he wore, end quote.
Wow. Wow, that's harsh.
Now, I don't think that's true, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't think she got the saloon. I think that was still his.
Okay.
Now, apparently, after these two separate, or perhaps after they divorce, it's kind of hard to tell from the old news reports, she'd allowed him to come home and live with her and the children for a little bit.
Really?
But then she kicked his butt back out again. What we do know is that sometime before June of 1903, Michael beat Mary nearly to death. So he owns this saloon. He's also a drinker and a drunk. And he beats Mary.
Wow.
He was arrested, and when Mary went to testify against him for the assault, she was barely able to stand there and testify against him because she is so beat up. She's so injured.
Jeez.
For this assault, Michael is sent to the workhouse. And in 1903 in Ohio, a workhouse was just a correctional facility used for shorter sentences and petty offenses. He almost beat his wife to death, and he's in for a petty offense. It was supposed to provide productive labor and rehabilitation. And while in the workhouse, you might have to farm or garden or make things like chairs. And the Cleveland workhouse was known for its extensive industrial and agricultural operations. But that's where Michael has been sent after nearly beating his wife, his estranged wife, Mary, to death.
All right.
Now, after this, after he goes to the workhouse, Mary sends $4,000 home to Hungary. She's planning on leaving and taking her children with her. She's going home. And she sent, in today's money, about $145,000 back to the motherland.
Wow.
So, again, they didn't start out with a lot, but he's made a lot of money and he's pocketed a lot of money.
Right. It sounds like he's drank a lot of the money, too.
I think he probably has.
Yeah.
In the late afternoon of June 1st, 1903, a drunken Michael Schiller shows up at Mary's house. She and the children are all home. The newspapers had a couple of reasons why he was there. The more savory option was that all of his property in the United States and in Austro-Hungary were in Mary's name, and he was there to demand that she sign it over to him. And that was true. I do know that all the property was in her name.
Okay.
The unsavory reason he shows up is that he is there to, quote, demand she resume marital relations with him, end quote. He wants sex. He's drunk and he wants sex.
Wow.
He's just drunk and ready to go.
That sounds romantic.
Yeah. Mr. Romantic.
Nothing says romance like a drunk ex-husband.
Exact. Demanding sex.
Demanding sex. Or that she turned over everything that the court gave to her.
Right.
Now, in all but one newspaper article, I read that he was drunk when he shows up that afternoon on June 1st.
I was drunk.
He told her that if she didn't sleep with him, he was going to cut her heart out. And I read he was in a, quote, ugly mood, end quote.
Yeah, that pretty much defines an ugly mood when you're saying you're going to cut somebody's heart out. Jeez.
I'll cut your heart out.
Oh, wow.
I'm gonna rip your heart out and eat it for breakfast.
Oh, sure, honey. If you put it that way, let's go.
Oh, that changes everything.
Wow.
But when he says, woman, we're having sex, she says no. And whether that was to signing over the property to him or having sex with him or both, the answer was no.
Mm-hmm.
And he grabs her and she tries to get away. She runs into the yard yelling for help. Michael catches up to her and, quote, with the strength of a demon, held her while he stabbed her in the abdomen, disemboweling her.
Oh.
Then she sank to the ground, end quote.
Wow.
I don't know how many times he stabbed her, but so many of the newspapers said that he disemboweled her.
Jeez.
And I did read in one source that the children witnessed all of this, especially Minnie, the oldest, who's the daughter. She's like 11 or 12 at the time.
Good grief.
Now, the neighbors see what's happening because it's a big kerfuffle in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And they rush to help Mary. They pull Michael off of her, and they hold him down until the police show up. And they cart him off to jail, to the Youngstown, Ohio jail. And she goes to the hospital. She is mortally wounded. She's dying. But before she goes, she gives the authorities her statement about what happened that day. She gives all the details, which is good, because he could have twisted the story around and come out of it unscathed, saying that she was crazy or something, because he's a man, she's a woman, it's 1903.
Right.
We've come a long way, ladies.
You've come a long way, baby.
You've come a long way, baby, to get what you've got. No, never mind. Go ahead.
I liked the one. It was, I can bring home the bacon.
I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan.
Fried up in a pan.
I can bet.
Because I'm a woman. That's right. But I say this because after they cart him off to jail, he never asks how his wife is. And Mary dies of her injuries on Sunday, June 7th, 1903. And when they tell Michael, your ex-wife Mary is dead, he showed no emotion. And one source actually quoted him as saying, quote, I'm in a hell of a fix now, end quote.
I'm in a terrible fix.
Yeah, don't worry about your wife. It's all about you.
Or your children.
Yeah.
Because you're in jail and now your wife is dead.
Wow.
And for all the reports that he was drunk, there was one report in the Cleveland Leader that said, quote, Schiller was sober and said that if he had been let alone, he would have killed the woman, end quote.
What?
So whether he was sober or drunk, his intention was the same. He was there to kill her.
Okay.
And I think that's because if she's dead, then all the properties, everything comes back to him again. Or it goes to the children, and then he would be the custodian of all of that.
All right. I got it.
Now, the children, they're orphans, basically. They're split up based on sex and age. And many went to St. Joseph's Orphan Asylum in Cleveland. The two boys, Gustav and Fred, went to St. Vincent Boys Asylum on the west side of Columbus, Ohio. And little Michael Leo went to St. Anne's Infant Asylum.
That's just,
So they're all in these little orphanages.
Jeez.
And I have pictures of all of these orphanages. And let me tell you what, it's a sad little place.
yeah. Well, just the fact that they all got split up.
Yeah, they didn't get to stay together.
Yeah, first of all, their mom's gone, their dad's in jail, and now they're split up. I mean, as a kid, you just got to be reeling.
Sure, for sure,
Wow.
for sure. But let me tell you what, this little Minnie, this little 12-year-old,
Yeah.
she's got some chutzpah. You're gonna like her.
She the boss.
She is. She turns boss babe early in her life.
Okay.
The case goes to trial during the May term of common pleas in Youngstown, Ohio, in Mahoning County. Is that right? Mahoning, Youngstown?
I don't know.
I think it's Mahoning. I think I'm saying that right.
I'm an Ohio boy, but I don't know that one.
Come on, Rob.
I know.
The indictment, the trial, and the conviction all happened between the time of the murder on June 1st and the end of July. You know, you think about this now, people would commit a murder and then they would go to jail and then they would be like on trial in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And sentenced and gone or whatever. And let me tell you what, when they get the death penalty, it's like, okay, next Friday, you're gone.
It's kind of like Back to the Future 2, I think. Yeah, Back to the Future 2, when Doc Brown says,
The justice system works swiftly in the future now that they've abolished all lawyers.
the justice is quicker in the future because everything happened like within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, seriously, it's true.
Yeah.
Because on July 24th, Michael is convicted of first-degree murder without mercy.
Wow.
And on August 1st, he is taken to the Columbus Penitentiary. He is scheduled to die in the electric chair on November 10th, 1903. And he's taken to Columbus with 3 other men who are awaiting their own executions. Listen, they were executing people right and left.
Yeah.
2 brothers, Ben and Al Wade from Toledo, and Philip Nigel from Wyandotte County.
Okay.
I know I got that one right because I looked it up. I was like, that looks like Wyandotte, but it's Wyandotte.
Okay.
Then on October 4th, Minnie Gussie, Fred, and Michael's Uncle George Unt, U-N-T-C-H,
Okay.
whose wife is actually Michael's sister. So it's his brother-in-law by marriage.
All right.
He's in Cleveland, and he gathers up his nephews and his niece from their various orphanages and took them to be photographed.
Okay.
And I have this photograph, which I will share in the In-Laws and Outlaws. But little baby Michael, who was just a year and a half old, was too weak to hold his head up. The baby, little Michael Leo, died a week later at
What?
St. Anne's Infant Asylum. Apparently, he suffered from hydrocephalus, which is an abnormal amount of cerebral spinal fluid in the
Right,
brain, causes too much pressure, can lead to brain damage and death.
Wow.
His body was taken to Youngstown for burial by the children's uncle, Uncle George, the guy who came and took the picture with him.
Okay.
But I also think when you take a baby that young away from its mother, and they were just put in these beds that are just in rows,
Yeah.
like these cribs that are in rows, and the babies were just there. I think that, you know, babies don't necessarily thrive without their mom.
Right.
So that's little Michael. But big Michael, his dad, learns of the death of his son while he's in prison in Columbus awaiting his execution when a letter from his attorney is brought to his cell. And apparently he showed no signs of grief. Michael is all about himself.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, his attorney files to overturn his conviction on the grounds that the trial judge failed to fully and properly instruct the jury about the meaning and effect of a recommendation to mercy. Because in capital murder cases at the time, if a jury found the defendant guilty but added a recommendation of mercy, the sentence would automatically be life imprisonment instead of execution. And this judge that presided over Michael's first trial didn't give the proper instructions about mercy.
See, I always wondered about that too. I mean, somebody that's been, convicted and sentenced to death, which is worse, just getting it over with or spending the rest of your life in an 8x8 cell?
Well, last week we talked about the Iceman. And one thing I forgot to say is that after they got him in cuffs, he was like, just let me go, let me run and shoot me. And they were like, no, we don't want to kill you, because his whole thing was control. And that's what they took away from him.
Right.
Was control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, is it better? I mean, he wanted to live. I think he wanted to live regardless of whether it was living his life out in prison.
Right.
He wanted to live.
He knew where he was going.
I deserve this! I deserve this!
I think he probably knew where he was going.
Yeah.
But in Michael's case, this trial court gave incomplete or misleading instructions and did not clearly explain to the jury that a recommendation of mercy would legally bind the court to impose a sentence of life imprisonment, and the defendant would not be eligible for parole. He'd spend the rest of his life in prison. And without this critical clarification, jurors may have withheld mercy out of concern that Michael would be eventually released, when in reality, he wouldn't even have the hope of a pardon.
Right.
He was just going to be there no matter what.
Right.
Meanwhile, little Minnie, Michael's 12-year-old daughter, is interviewed by the press when she goes to visit her dad. She wanted out of the orphanage so she could, this just broke my heart, so she could visit the grave of her youngest brother, who had died just 2 months after her mom. And when the press asks her if she wanted to go back to Youngstown to live, now what do you think she said?
Yes.
Yeah, quote, do you want to go back to Youngstown to live, Minnie? Quote, yes, sir, if Papa comes out, end quote.
Oh, wow.
Do you think your Papa will come for you, Minnie? Quote, oh, yes, sir, I hope so. I don't know, end quote.
Jeez.
The sisters at St. Joseph's, with the help of an Italian priest in Youngstown, had found Minnie a home with an Italian family who were very eager to adopt her. But they needed the permission of her father, and he said, no way.
Ugh.
His only reason is his quote, forlorn hope of escaping the electric chair, end quote.
Okay. Good luck with that.
Yeah. And he said when he's dead that Minnie can go to her new home. After he's gone, if he's dead, that Minnie can do whatever she wants to do. Well, yeah, she will after you're dead, Michael. But he wants to use her. He wants to use her. And I'm going to tell you how in just a second.
Okay.
After Michael's first conviction, Minnie wrote to the governor of Ohio, Governor Nash, begging him to spare her father. She would write to her dad telling him that she was praying for him daily. He writes to her on occasion telling her to be a good girl, but most of all to, quote, wait for me, end quote. Now, Minnie charms the press. She's a pretty little girl, and they ask her what she wants if her father didn't come for her soon. And she said, yes, if he doesn't come, I would like to go with anybody. He told me to wait for him, but I suppose he won't care where I wait, and I would like to see my baby brother's grave, end quote.
Man.
Now, this case goes all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court.
Wow.
To get it overturned. And Sheriff Thomas, who was from Youngstown, had just returned from delivering prisoners to the Columbus Penitentiary. And while he's there, he had a chat with Michael. I think these two are friends, and you're going to find out why in just a little bit.
Okay.
He comes in and he visits with Michael. And Michael was sentenced to be executed the very next Tuesday on November 10th. And Michael said to him, quote, Sheriff, you can bet every dollar you're worth that they won't get me in the chair next Tuesday, end quote. And he was right. That night, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled that Michael should get another trial. One judge, Judge Lawby, dissented from his colleagues and said that it was a brutal and cruel murder from which the murderer might escape through a technical loophole.
Yep.
But while he awaited his next trial in the May term of 1904, a year after his first conviction, it was also held in Mahoning County Court of Common Pleas. And again, he is found guilty of murder one without a recommendation of mercy. So honestly, all they did was delay his death due to a technicality and take up time in the court. They delayed it for a year.
Yeah.
When Michael makes it back to the Penn Annex, or that's what they call their death row in Ohio, he's silent, he's stubborn, he's in a foul mood all the time. I would be too if I was about to die in the electric chair.
Yeah.
And back then it was, wham, bam. He murdered her in June. By July, he's guilty. And even with the decision that made it all the way to the Supreme Court, he was back in court a year later. And once again, he was found guilty of murder one. So he's scheduled to go to the electric chair on June 17th, 1904, not long after his second trial and conviction. And this time, his children didn't want to be around him. They would only see him 2 more times before the day of his execution. And part of the reason Michael didn't want to give up parental rights and allow his children to be adopted and into good homes, like many into this Italian family, was because if he relinquished his parental rights, he couldn't use his daughter to plead for his life once more to the governor.
Wow.
Now, during their second and final meeting, he meets up with the kids. Michael begged little Minnie to call upon the governor in the hope he would find it impossible to turn down this little girl sobbing. He told her, quote, "Go to the governor and save my life, Minnie," end quote.
Wow.
And she told him, quote, "I cannot go," end quote.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes. She
Wow.
said, "I can't go."
Wow.
And he said, quote, "Then write to him for God's sake and tell him not to let me be electrocuted," end quote. And she said, quote, "No, I don't want to do that. The governor has decided, and I do not wish to ask him anyhow," end quote.
She's kind of like wise beyond her years.
Yeah.
Wow.
According to the Cincinnati Enquirer, quote, "This angered the father and he scolded the child," end quote. Well, I bet he did, because he's an asshole to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is when she finally cries, when he yells at her. And they spoke to each other, not in English, but in German. And Sister Housegardener, the nun who was with her, came with her from the orphanage. She interpreted for the press. So German was spoken by the upper classes and in Austria, while Hungarian was the dominant language in Hungary. But he is Hungarian, but they were speaking German to each other.
Okay.
So I don't know, but Sister Housegardener was there telling the reporter that Minnie feared her father would kill her as he did her mother. And she did not want to make the trip to see him that last time, and she made the nuns promise that she would not be left alone with her father. Now, quote, "There was a demonstration of Minnie's fear during the final visit when Sister Housegardener expressed a desire to see the electric chair," end quote.
Oh, wow.
So the nun's like, "Well, wait here, honey. I want to go see the death chamber." This is from the Cincinnati Enquirer.
Okay.
Quote, "She told the child she would be back in a minute and started, but Minnie followed, declaring she would not stay with her father, even with the prison guard present," end quote.
Don't blame her.
They met up with their dad at the south end of the prison court where 10 condemned men were waiting death. They were in the court for their daily airing, whatever that was, when Sister Housegardener and the kids showed up to see their dad one last time. Minnie's 12 now, Gustav is 8, Fred's 5. Freddie didn't run to see his dad as he usually did, but he stood back, quote, "his sturdy legs far apart, regarding his father with a steady gaze in which there seemed to be something of sorrow and reproach," end quote. The papers really love to romanticize all this.
Yeah.
Then Michael came close to the children, and they shook hands. He shook hands with his little boys,
Wow.
8 and 5. Yeah. And the press did say, quote, "Freddie's greeting seemed to hurt Michael Schiller more than anything else," end quote.
Okay.
He had actually arranged for a sack of fruit and cakes and candies for each of the kids to be brought to them from the prison refreshment stand by a, quote, "trusty convict," end quote. There's an oxymoron for you.
Jeez.
He kissed each of them when he said goodbye, telling them to be good, but he didn't cry. And Minnie didn't cry either. She only cried after they left. She wasn't going to show her dad any tears.
Right.
Yeah. And Sister Housegardener asked Michael what he, quote, "desired to be made of his children," whether he wanted them legally adopted into good families or wanted his relatives to have them. She suggested that an uncle in Youngstown had made an application for Minnie, and Michael said that he could not have her. He said that Administrator Michael Willow of Youngstown, that's going to be his accountant and his attorney, would handle the dead wife's estate of $6,500 or about $219,000 in today's money.
Okay.
And that would rear the children until they were, quote, able to earn their own way, end quote. So he's like, I don't want anybody to have them. They've got plenty of money. I don't care if they don't have emotional support. I don't want anybody to have them.
Wow.
But after he's gone, he has no say. So
Okay.
the day before his execution, Michael met with the same attorney and authorized him to liquidate his property holdings both in the United States and in Austria-Hungary. Then only after some of that money was used to erect a burial monument to him would the rest of the money go to his 3 children. But first, he wanted a monument.
What an egomaniac.
Michael G. Schiller, prisoner number 34925, was to be executed on June 17th, 1904, just after midnight. The electrician, a Mr. Marden, tested the electric chair several times that night and proclaimed it was in perfect working order. And it apparently unnerved Michael to hear them testing the chair. He could hear it down the hall.
Wow.
Funny thing, about 2 years before the murder, Michael met the sheriff in Columbus, and the two went through the Columbus Penitentiary. And Michael was interested in the death chamber and its equipment, and during the inspection asked if he could sit in the electric chair. Is it safe? Can I sit in this chair? And he was assured that it would be safe. He's laughing. He sat in the chair, and they put the leather straps on him that would hold it like a convicted person down.
Right.
And then they set him free. And he said, quote, "That would be an easy death," end quote.
Jeez. Well, there's some foreshadowing.
You beat me to it. I was
Wait.
just about to say, that's called foreshadowing.
Here comes.
Yes. That is like the biggest. He said, that's going to be an easy death.
Jeez.
It's not going to be an easy death at all. At all.
Wow.
Now, his own death was just a few hours away, and Michael called for a pen and paper to write to his 12-year-old daughter, Minnie. He's outwardly calm and resigned to his fate. The strong man's, quote, anguish flowered from the tip of the pen.
Jeez. Wow.
Quote, "My little daughter, this is the last letter I will ever write. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I am to be electrocuted. I'm not afraid. My head is right now, and I will go to the next world prepared to meet whatever punishment is in store for me." He has no idea the amount of punishment that's in store for him.
Yeah.
"Little daughter, don't let anybody discourage you or make you unhappy. Try to think well of me, for I swear I was not myself. Your promise to be a mother to Freddie and Gussie has made me happy," end quote. Yeah.
Whatever, Michael.
And he says this because when she went to see their dad that last time, Minnie promised her dad that she would take her mother's place and take care of the boys.
Okay.
He continues, quote, "I enclose a picture of your mother and one of myself. Keep and cherish them as long as you live. Kiss the boys for me goodbye, little daughter, goodbye," end quote. Yeah. Now, on the day of his execution, Michael refused all spiritual consultation. He didn't want to be around the preacher, didn't want to be around the priest. They were there for him.
Yeah.
Father Kelly, the Catholic priest, tried for hours to get Michael to confess his sins. No confession. Minnie had actually written to him asking and pleading with him to accept Christ into his heart, this little girl.
God.
But he was indifferent to what was about to happen to him, other than being unnerved because he can hear them testing the chair.
Yeah, you would think that, especially when he was saying, when I go to the other world, wherever that is, or whatever he said, he's obviously cognizant of the fact that there is an afterlife.
Yeah, I'm ready to accept whatever
Yeah.
fate for is. Yeah.
You would think that you go, listen, I got a 50-50 shot here, so why don't I go ahead and let that priest in?
Yeah, well, it's going to be a long, strange trip to hell for him. Just wait.
Okay, all right.
He didn't order a fancy last meal, even though he was offered one. He barely ate or drank. They even offered him whiskey, but he said, quote, "The stuff caused my downfall and I'll have none of it at the last," end quote. He spent most of the night pacing back and forth in his cell, and he thought all along that something or someone would intervene and save him from his fate. He thought perhaps the governor would, at the last moment, commute his death sentence to life in prison. He kept an eye on the annex clock, the annex that was that's what the Ohio called death row. At 11:30 p.m., guards came into the death cage, or Michael's cell, along with John O'Brien, the prison barber, and the prison barber. John O'Brien is a guard and the prison barber.
Okay.
And one of the guards said to him, quote, "Well, Mike, it's time to prepare for this unpleasant ordeal," end quote.
Wow.
At the same time, they put down a stool, told him to sit, and motioned for the barber to get started. And it's then that Michael Schiller lost all hope. And from that moment on, everybody said he was kind of in a trance and not really functioning mentally. He had mentally checked out.
Right.
Meanwhile, in the death chamber where the electric chair was, Superintendent Martin, who was in charge of the prison's generator and the chair, and his assistant did one final test of the chair. Everything seemed to be in perfect order. A-OK. And Martin was completely satisfied that he had done his part to make the execution a success. So Martin's like, generators running, chairs up to ready for the task. I'm good. I'm washing my hands of this, right?
Taking a seat in old Sparky.
Old Sparky's ready to go.
And Sparky's ready to go. The clock struck midnight, and for those who were there to witness the execution, they could hear the footsteps in the hallway. This old death chamber door swings open, and a crowd of 30 to 40 men were around this electric chair in a semicircle. And among them were the doctors who were overseeing the execution. They were Dr. Thomas and Dr. Arnold, who were the prison physicians, Dr. C.A. Szymanski from Sandusky, and Dr. H.C. Bennett and Dr. F.V. Bates from Lima, Ohio. Or is it Lima?
Lima,
Ohio. Okay. So the deputy warden, his name is Wood, he nodded, and it's Dead Man Walking.
Dead man walking.
But the procession to the death chamber was stopped at midnight by a long-distance telephone message from the governor. The governor is now Governor Herrick, who was in Chicago that day, and the message was to let Warden Hershey know of the official notice of the suspension of sentence that was granted to Charles Stimmel, a murderer from Dayton, Ohio, who was scheduled to die after Michael Schiller.
Oh, wow.
So can you imagine you're Dead Man Walking, you hear the phone ring, and you're like, oh. This is it. No, it's for the guy that's after you, dude.
Exactly.
Sorry for your luck.
Sorry, Charlie.
So Michael Schiller, he appears in the doorway. He's led by an assistant deputy warden, C.M. Long. He's leaning heavily on the arm of guard O'Brien. Michael was placed in the chair, and the straps were quickly adjusted by John O'Brien and a guard named F.M. Jewell. And at the request of Michael, his friend Charles Huster of Youngstown was present at his execution. So can you imagine? I'm dying. I'm going to be fried in the electric chair, but I want you there, man. I want you there, dude.
Are you my friend or not?
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow.
Also there from Youngstown was Sheriff James M. Thomas, who is the guy who gave him the tour of the death chamber 2 years prior to when he killed his wife or his ex-wife.
Man.
He's there as well, and Deputy George W. Turner. Now, the electrodes were placed on his shaved head and on the calf of his leg. When asked if he had anything to say, he was silent for a time, and then he said goodbye in a broken voice to Sheriff James Thomas of Youngstown. He refused all spiritual comfort and would not allow the chaplain to accompany him to the chair. He did not want God with him in that room, apparently.
Wow.
And let me tell you what, God was not in this room.
Yeah.
Then a black cap was placed on his head and over his eyes, and it was deathly quiet. Quote, the dropping of a pin at that moment would have grated harshly on the nerves of the spectators, end quote.
Man.
Warden Edward Hershey asked in a clear and firm voice, quote, Michael Schiller, have you anything to say before the sentence of the court shall finally have been carried out, end quote. And Schiller's lips moved, but no sound came out. The warden held his watch in his right hand, and with his left, he reached for the lever, and as he broke it, the body of Michael Schiller shot upward as far as the leather straps would allow him to go. There was a low hissing sound as the 1,750 volts of electricity went coursing through his body. This was continued for 7 seconds. Then the current was reduced to 250 volts for the remainder of the minute, and then the current was shut off and his body relaxed. Dr. Thomas examined the heart, the pulse, his eyes. 5 other doctors did the exact same thing, and all pronounced him dead. And all I could think of was,
Do you concur?
do you concur? Do you concur?
Do you concur?
Do you concur?
Yeah.
The warden and the witnesses to the execution, they all filed out of the room and down the hallway. And then the attending guards loosened the leather clamps that were they were holding Michael Schiller's body, his dead body, into this chair.
Right.
And they're going to place him on what they call the cooling board. But when they undo the straps, the body slumps over and they hear Michael Schiller let out a sigh.
Yeah.
And then a gurgling sound
Whoa.
came from his lips, and Michael gasped and struggled for breath.
Jeez.
According to the Cincinnati Enquirer, quote, he straightened up in the chair and he began to breathe heavily. Saliva was falling from his mouth and guttural groans sounded throughout the chamber, chilling the strongest men to the very heart, end quote.
Yeah. He's alive! I would think so. Wow.
But just because he wasn't dead didn't mean that he was done, because the death warrant stated that the prisoner shall be executed until he or she is dead. And Michael's not dead.
He's not dead yet.
I'm not dead. What?
They're going to have to do it all over again.
Oh, man.
But it's going to take some time to get everybody back together again. And it would take some time for Mr. Martin to hustle back down to the power plant and turn the generator back on. And according to the Cincinnati Enquirer, quote, Schiller seemed to be regaining consciousness. At one time, he appeared to throw back his head as if making a desperate effort to talk. The sight was absolutely sickening. Spectators expected to see him recover, end quote. So someone goes to track down the warden. Can you imagine just the chaos right now in this prison?
Warden, we have a little bit of a problem
Yeah.
here.
The crowd, the doctors, they're all reassembled. The straps are readjusted. And by this time, Michael is breathing on his own. He's pretty much breathing normally.
Jeez.
But this prison powerhouse, the building that housed the generator, was several hundred yards away, football fields away. And this superintendent, Martin,
Run!
he's running. He's running the football. He's running the length of a few football fields to get to the generator.
Yeah.
Then they were ready again. And again, the lever was pushed up. And again, 1,750 volts of electricity went through Michael Schiller's body. This time, the high voltage was continued for 15 seconds, then reduced to 250 for the remainder of the minute. And this time, the doctors made a thorough and careful inspection. They examined his body for 12 minutes. And they all said, okay, yep, this time he's really dead. He's dead this time.
Yeah.
So again, the crowd breaks up. The body's lifted from the chair and placed on the floor to wait for the undertaker. The warden was back in his office, probably with his nerves frazzled, and the majority of the crowd was getting ready to head for home. 2 of the guards covered Michael's corpse on the ground with a sheet while they're waiting for the prison's cemetery crew to show up. And just as the prison guards were about to leave the execution room, and Michael dead on the floor, Michael Schiller let out a long and painful groan.
What?
And these two guards look at each other in horror. Again, the gurgling sound was heard. Chief Guard O'Brien lifts the sheets and finds Michael Schiller gasping for air. He still is not dead.
He's not dead yet.
I'm not quite dead, sir.
Yeah.
Again.
Again.
Oh my gosh.
Here we go again.
See, here's the problem.
Again.
Instead of him owning a saloon, he should have worked for the electric company. Good Lord. Jeez.
So again, they summon the warden, who at this point had to be like,
What the hell is that shit?
what the hell?
Yeah, guys.
is happening?
You've got one job.
You had one job.
You had one job. And the warden and the attending physician, they came alone. No more spectators
Yeah.
for the third execution.
Yeah.
This time they increased the voltage so high that no human could survive it. 1900 volts of electricity, the greatest power ever into a human body in the Ohio State Penitentiary.
Man.
And they kept it there for 30 seconds, then finally reduced it to 500 for 30 seconds longer. It was so high they burned the top of his head to a crisp.
Jeez.
But Michael Schiller was finally dead. Third time's a charm, or third time's a harm.
Oh, man.
His execution started at 12:01. It ended at 12:30.
Jeez.
So for 30 minutes, they electrocuted this man and tortured him until he finally died.
Wow.
The next morning, the press was having a field
I
day.
can imagine.
Whose fault was it that Michael didn't die the first time he was electrocuted, let alone the second?
Yeah.
And expert electricians came from all over the country to say that the state of Ohio's electric chair was in first-class order.
Yeah.
Now, this exonerated Superintendent Martin, who was in charge of checking out the chair and was the guy who was running the football fields to make sure the generator was on.
Yeah.
They chalked it all up to the fact that Michael Schiller hadn't had water for several days leading up to his execution.
Ah.
That was their theory. The other inmates at the prison in Columbus thought that it was because Michael was the 13th person to use that chair, and it was unlucky.
Well, that's an understatement.
That's an understatement.
God.
But the experts stated that the body needed to be hydrated in order for the electrocution to take place. And of course, I had to look this up, right? I had to look it up.
Yeah.
And dehydration before an electric chair execution wouldn't alter the primary method of death, which is electrocution. However, it could exacerbate the pain and suffering experienced during the execution, potentially making it more agonizing, according to a 1993 paper. So electrocuting a dehydrated body is more risky because it impacts the body's electrical conductivity, and a hydrated body may have a higher resistance to the electrical current, potentially leading to increased heat buildup and burn damage, and potentially increasing the risk of a slower death. And they also said it's just going to make you feel terrible while you're being electrocuted.
Wow.
So basically what they're saying is the primary cause of death in electrocution is the body's inability to function after being overloaded with an electrical current, which would occur regardless of hydration status.
Gotcha.
Doctors Thomas and Arnold, two of the prison physicians who twice pronounced the murderer dead before death had actually come, said they couldn't and could not figure out how Michael Schiller had this remarkable hold on life.
Yeah.
He seemed to them dead. His heart wasn't pumping. His pulse showed no movement. But again, they think that the dry condition of his body is to blame for the resistance to the current. And Schiller's power of resistance against death. They're like, he just didn't want to go down. He wasn't going to go down. And Dr. Szymanski of Sandusky said, quote, "There is no doubt that Schiller was beyond all hope of being revived after receiving the first shock. The noises, which sounded so much like groans, were nothing but stertorous breathing. He was wholly unconscious, and the effort to breathe was altogether mechanical, not mental. He suffered no pain." That's a big fat lie.
Yeah.
Schiller showed a resistance of 8 amperes, whereas a resistance of more than 5 is extraordinary, end quote.
Man.
So they're kind of covering their own butt. They're
Sure.
like, he was really dead.
Yeah.
We didn't need to do all of that. He was dead. But the people from the newspaper, the reporters were like, by the time they started the second one, he was breathing fine on his own.
Yeah.
Warden Hershey thought it barely possible that there may have been some partial failure of the power, though it had been carefully tested a few moments before the execution. And the doctors are unable to say whether or not Michael suffered after the first and the second contacts. But Dr. Szymanski said he didn't. He was dead.
Yeah.
Because his appearance was that of a man in terrible agony, and he seemed to be trying to speak. So Dr. Szymanski, he wasn't dead. That wasn't,
Yeah.
people didn't just he was trying to cover his own butt. They
Right.
weren't imagining this. He's gaslighting them.
Right.
But after Michael was finally dead, his friend Charles Huster and his attorney Michael Willow, they took Michael's body back to Youngstown, Ohio. And his attorney said, quote, "It was the most unsatisfactory electrocution that has yet been performed in this state."
Yeah.
End quote.
Once again, understatement.
Yeah. Minnie got her letter from her father after he died. She and her brothers hadn't been told explicitly that their dad was dead, but according to the news reports, Minnie knew. She read the letter from her father, then she quietly folded it and replaced it in the envelope. She was dry-eyed. She even tried to smile. She loved her dad, but she was afraid of him. He'd been good to her when he was sober, but when he was drunk, he was a different person.
Right.
And he was drunk when he stabbed his wife to death. And Minnie actually witnessed the knife and the blow to her mother's stomach,
Yeah.
which has to be horrible.
Yeah. How do you live with that as a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now get this. The next night, June 18th, 1904, a man named Moses Johnson was to die by the electric chair for the murder of an insurance agent named Edward Test in Portsmouth. It took 5 applications of electrical charge before he was pronounced dead.
What?
5.
What's going on?
It's the chair. There's something up with the chair.
Yeah.
Clearly, or the generator, or something was wrong.
Yeah.
1,750 volts the first time at 12:05, but he still had a heartbeat. Then the second and third and fourth time. Then the 5th time, he was finally pronounced dead at 12:20. He remained seated in the electric chair the entire time. But his death was still 10 minutes shy of Michael Schiller's. And he got 5 charges.
Man.
I couldn't find any trace of the children or what became of them. What I did find was that Mary Schiller, who was buried in St. Joseph Cemetery in Youngstown, Ohio, was buried without a grave marker. He wanted a monument. She didn't even get a marker. And when St. Joseph's Church was torn down in the early 1900s, most of the bodies were moved to other cemeteries, but not all. And it's believed that those bodies remain at the site because of no records to trace them after their burials.
Right.
And the cause was originally money. So if your relatives had the money to move you and they could afford to have a body moved, then they would be moved. But there is no record of a cemetery transfer for those who didn't have the money. And that was Mary. So the rest are still there because families didn't have the money to move them. And if the family didn't,
Yeah.
they were taking them to Calvary Cemetery. But the archdiocese didn't move them at all. And there are close to 1,000 people still there, including, more than likely, Mary and her infant son, Michael Leo. He may still be there.
Sad.
So was it the chair? Was it the generator? Did he really just deserve to get shocked 3 times and suffer for a half hour because he was a horrible person?
Yeah.
I don't know. But it took 3 times to get him to go. And that's the story of Michael Schiller. 3rd time's the harm, or the charm, whichever way you want to look at it. But that's all I have to say about that.
All right. My takeaway from this whole thing.
Rob's take.
The fact, out of everything that happened, the fact that in the end, he didn't want any spiritual consultation whatsoever. I
No.
mean, this guy was defiant to the very end.
He was.
It's just,
But yet he wanted a monument to himself.
yeah, I mean, talk about a narcissistic, egotistical SOB.
Yeah.
That's pretty much, if you look that up in the dictionary, his
Yeah.
picture's going to be there.
I don't think he was just a mean drunk. I think he was just mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But I mean, it's just crazy. And it's kind of hard to find this story, but pretty interesting that not only him, but the guy after him had to have the lever turned on 5 times.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Well, Michael's in a better place right now for him. Regardless, let's do a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number 1, he needed a life alert.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
A Louisville, Kentucky man,
Yes.
has been arrested for failing to appear in court. And then, well, wait, here's what took place.
Okay.
Michael McWhorter, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, was located at a home in the 2000 block of St. Xavier Street.
Okay.
Just before 3:45 p.m. The LMPD, which is the Louisville Metro Police Department,
Yeah.
has identified McWhorter as possession of a prohibited firearm and failed to appear in court on a felony gun charge. Boy, that was a mouthful.
So he has a gun and he didn't show up for the charge of having a gun.
You're right.
Okay.
And he's got a felony, right. Okay. So the LMPD's fugitive unit notified the SWAT team who responded to the residence.
My gosh.
And after a few hours, they learned that McWhorter was hiding so well that he was stuck in the home's ductwork.
He got into the ductwork?
Yeah. SWAT pulled him from the ductwork and arrested him.
How'd they find him in the ductwork? Did he sneeze or something?
I have no idea.
Cough?
Oh, that's when you're really trying to hide.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, number 2. I swear it's true.
Okay.
A Florida man accused of shoplifting more than $4,000 worth of merchandise from Walmart blamed it on something that was totally legit. Not.
Oh, I was like, what?
He claims that his diabetes is at fault and that his blood sugar caused him to not always know what he was doing.
No, that is not a valid excuse.
You think?
Yeah.
The man was busted twice at the same Walmart 2 different times, attempting to steal over $2,000 worth of stuff.
But my blood sugar's low.
Yeah. After the arrest, they discovered that there were 2 other previous attempts at shoplifting another $2,000 worth of merchandise.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah, diabetes or not, this man is not good at shoplifting. The man was arrested and being held by Florida authorities. Once again, in Florida.
Yeah.
We love
Florida.
Yeah, we always get enough content from Florida. Okay, number 3.
Number 3.
Is
And
this-
finally, you didn't say
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry. And number 3. And finally.
There you go.
Is this unreasonable request? A 20-year-old woman in Utah got busted for underage drinking last Wednesday. Then cops found weed. But only after she asked if they'd pack her a bowl before she went to jail.
If they pack her a bowl?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I just need a couple more hits, man. Just a couple more.
The whole incident started when the woman got into an altercation with her boyfriend and tried kicking out his windshield. She was charged with consumption of alcohol by a minor, possession,
she's
and
a
criminal
minor.
mischief. Yeah.
She's a minor too.
Yeah. Her name is Farias Swenson. Says she was not drinking mouthwash, but was actually drinking tequila. I don't know why she would say that out loud, but whatever.
She just needs one more felony.
And then she says she doesn't have a boyfriend, and the man involved in the incident was just a good friend. Swenson says she didn't have any alcohol with her when the police stopped her. She did say, however, that she asked the police to load me up a bowl because I was in cuffs.
I just need one. Can you hold the peace pipe up? I just need one more hit. Just one more.
She posted on social media that the story by the cops was an effing lie.
Oh.
So there's
whatever.
There's your bless your
Make it
heart.
a bad thing worse, sister.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to Hitched to Homicide. When you get there, there's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime. We got lots of case suggestions coming in. I'm going to get to every single one of them, I promise.
Cool.
That's my amazing husband out there.
That's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.